If you look around my office, you might realize I have kind of a love for dark, twisted cartoons. And a lot of that may be because I grew up with a lot of dark, twisted cartoons. Now, I'm not talking about the ones like Batman or ones that were meant for older kids. I'm talking about the ones that were meant for little kids, and they probably should have been made for little kids. And I loved the hell out of them. I enjoyed how much they scared me. I loved how every time you got through one, you felt a little tougher. So I'm doing a series reacting and reviewing them. We're gonna analyze how creative they are, how dark they are, and if the dark, twisted tone was warranted. So join me in taking a look at some Dark Toons. Alcohol, drugs, birds. That's the hardest addiction to beat, man. Birds Anonymous was released in 1957. It won an Academy Award and for good reason. Let's take a look. This was directed by Friz Freleng, and I know out of the Looney Tunes directors, we usually talk about Chuck Jones, but Friz Freleng was a very good director. He's just a little bit more under the radar, not quite a household name, but anyone that knows Looney Tunes cartoons, or even just cartoons in general, knows what a mad talent he was, and this, in my opinion, is his best work. This opening alone has some wonderful shadows, some really cool angles in it that you didn't usually see in a Friz Freleng cartoon, but for an opening like this, it's supposed to look a little creepy. I think it goes really well. Boris Gorolik, hopefully I'm saying that right, did the backgrounds, and usually his backgrounds are a little bit more like you'd see in the rest of his cartoons. Strange patterns like dots and spirals, stuff you'd usually see in a cartoon, but for this opening, I think he does a really good job at trying something a little different. Friz Freleng was apparently a big Hitchcock fan. He actually satirizes Hitchcock Presents in another cartoon. So the fact that this opening is very suspenseful, I think it's very clear he sort of borrowed a lot from him and his style. This whole opening just has a real psycho look to it. Very Hitchcockian here, sort of that mix of dark shadows, but kind of a pleasant background, pleasant colors behind it. Hitchcock did a lot of stuff like that, and again, you can tell he was a big fan.
I saw a puddy cat.
So even looking at Sylvester's eye, it looks a little bit more demented than usual, like he is crazed, he's obsessed over getting Tweety, which is like in any cartoon, but this is one that's focusing that he has a problem. So even just from the eye, the first time you see his eye, you know there's a problem with him.
I wouldn't do that if I were you.
This character was called Clarence in one of the Looney Tunes movies, though apparently he had some other names, but I just call him Clarence. And you'll notice that his voice is very similar to Marvin the Martian, but it's still a very different character. It's a different personality, and of course Mel Blanc does all the voices in this cartoon, and even though the pitch sounds like Marvin the Martian, if you were to hear these two back to back, you wouldn't mistake one for the other. They still have a very different way of delivering their lines.
The Aluminum Q-36 explosive space modulator. It only takes one bird to start you, and before you know it, it's two birds, then three.
And what I like too is that he's serving as kind of a literal ray of light here. You notice as soon as he opens the window, everything's a little brighter. There's still a shadow there, but the shadow is not as dark. He's gonna offer him this way to get over his addiction, and he gives him a card to Birds Anonymous. This is obviously a takeoff of Alcoholics Anonymous, which was known back then, but not as well known as it is now. It was starting to really pick up attention. But I wouldn't be surprised if this was the first cartoon to ever address Alcoholics Anonymous. Obviously they don't say the name, but it's very clear that's what they're doing. That's another really fun angle. And again, what I like about this one is that the backgrounds, the textures anyway, are very simple and kind of very flat, but the actual layout of where that brick wall is and where the sign is and stuff, it's very visually pleasing to look at. Everything is pointing towards where the eye is supposed to focus, even though there's a lot going on.
I was a 3-bird-a-day pussycat until B.A. helped me.
And I think one of the reasons people remember this cartoon so well is that it does so very naturally capture addiction. And even the cats at this thing, I mean, it's a satire, obviously, but it still shows them as characters that are trying to get better. They're trying to beat something. They're not mean, they're not deranged or anything. They're trying to overcome a problem.
Being on a bird kick cost me 5 homes. B.A., help me solve my problem.
So that genuine nature not only makes it more funny because of how similar it is to real-life problems, but it also adds a lot of sympathy, and you actually feel for what the characters are going through in this, even though it's something as silly as cats eating birds. Sylvester is apparently over his problem, and he is humming Tiptoe Through the Window, which, if you're like me, you only know that song because of cartoons, Looney Tunes and so forth. Insidious tried to bring it back, trying to make it like a scary song. I thought almost made it more funny, honestly, especially the way they sing it.
Good morning, my little feathered friend.
And even shots of him just walking in and petting Tweety, everything's just a little off. The camera's a little lower and it's tilted. Just these little things to give the episode a little bit more of a different identity than your usual Sylvester episode. But obviously we see the temptation starts, and what is this, a minute into beating his addiction, and already it's crawling at him. One of the clever ways it ties into addiction is that it's showing something that is within a cat's nature, is to eat a bird. I mean, that's just what cats do. It's hard to stop a cat from eating a bird. It's just part of who they are. And I think that's a very clever way to have people understand what an addiction is like, because it feels like it's in your nature to do it. You're just so naturally gravitating towards that, even though it's something you shouldn't be doing. And again, look at those eyes. This isn't just another Sylvester cartoon where he just wants to get Tweety. He is battling something, and it is tearing him apart.
That was Bye Bye Blackbird. And now we'll play When the Red Red Robin Comes Bobbing Along.
And this is a classic cartoony setup where somebody's trying to stay away from something, so of course it's everywhere, tempting him. But again, when you tie in that classic setup, like, I don't know, think of like Whack-A-Warner and Potty Emergency, he just has to go to the bathroom, that, you know, doesn't mean much. But when you tie it into something as serious as addiction, it does make it a little bit more heavy.
Don't you like me anymore?
I think...
Come on, look at that animation. He is suffering. He is just going to pieces. He's delusional. He's just going mad.
I'm sorry I had to do that.
And I just love this idea that Clarence was apparently just watching this whole time, as he apparently does throughout this cartoon, like he's a sponsor, I guess. Now, this is the part where, if you're like me, you remember most. This is just Sylvester staying awake. He can't get to sleep. Again, his eyes are just bloodshot. I mean, he just wants to sleep, but his addiction is getting the best of him. And what I really love about this is we've talked a couple times about how a cartoon character, the body can just be totally lifeless, not move at all, but the eyes can move, and that can convey everything. This goes a step further. Even the eyes are not moving, but so much is conveyed just by cutting to different images of him in the bed, still awake. I think there's one bit of animation where his eyes are closed and he just cut to the eyes being open. They don't even animate them open, they're just open. And everybody can identify with this, even a kid. I mean, kids don't battle really addictions, but there's nights where they can't sleep and it drives them nuts. And I think that gets across here very clearly. And again, with the shadows and the colors and the moon shining in, I mean, everyone has had a night like this, whether it's battling an addiction or you just can't sleep or you're just thinking of stuff, whatever. Everybody can sympathize with this scene, even though it's very short. It stays with you. And then actual movement, actual animation starts with the music building here, and it's right before he finally cracks, and that's the perfect moment to have it. You just feel it building up. I just get a feeling anyone trying to beat something that's really, really difficult, they can identify with this.
No one will know the difference. No one. Just one, then I'll quit.
Just one. No one will know the difference, and I'll quit. This cartoon weirdly did its homework for something like this, which nowadays, again, you probably see satires like this all over the place, but back then, this just was not really done. And, you know, this terminology that now we're all very familiar with was probably not quite as familiar back then. So, again, to sort of pick up on these little ticks and these common phrases was very, very smart. And if you're also like me, the only thing you know about alum is that it's used to keep cartoon characters mouths closed to pucker them up so they can't eat something, commonly used in a Sylvester cartoon because he's always trying to eat a bird or a mouse, something very small. So Friz Freleng used this joke a lot. What it actually is, it's a compound used for pickling and canning. At least that's what I found out when I did research. I don't cook, so but as a little kid that always saw that, I want to know what it was, so now I know and you know too.
I can't stand it.
And people joke this is the performance that got Mel Blanc an Academy Award, which is half true. The cartoon won an award, and it was given to the producer, and he said after he passes away, he wanted to go to Mel Blanc. So Mel Blanc got it, and as such, he always said this was his favorite cartoon. Now, I don't know if that's because he literally has an Oscar for it, that can kind of sway you a certain way, but this performance is still very, very good. Again, it's very short, but you can just tell he's putting his all into it. It reminds me a lot of in What's Opera Doc, when Elmer Fudd saying, "What have I done? I killed the wabbit." You know, that's done for laughs. It's played seriously for laughs, but at the same time, you get kind of wrapped up in it because of how serious the performers are taking it, and you're really with Elmer when he says, "Poor little wabbit," and you're really with Sylvester when he says, "I can't help it." You just really feel this breakdown.
I'm weak. I'm weak, but I don't care.
I'm weak, but I don't care. Again, that's written for a laugh, but it can so easily be taken seriously in a strange way by doing their homework and really sort of tapping into the mindset of someone with addiction. They get across something that, yes, is funny, but is also very, very sad and very tragic. Again, it's always interesting how much the line between comedy and tragedy just really, really intertwines. But of course, it is still a Looney Tunes cartoon, so naturally, you gotta end on a punchline.
Stop it! Let me go! I gotta have it!
Once a bad old putty cat, always a bad old putty cat.
And there you go, a very goofy ending, which is probably needed at that point because you just see the main characters suffering so much. So I think that's the proper ending you would give at the time. But yeah. This is a really great cartoon. It's nice to talk about a Friz Freleng cartoon from Looney Tunes because, again, I do talk about Chuck Jones so much. I mean, it's one of my favorite cartoonists of all time. But Friz Freleng really was this great director, and I think this really demonstrates just sort of the variety of tones and styles that he did have. This one really, really gets across and stays with people and won the Oscar because it did treat a subject matter, you know, both in a silly way and a very serious way as well. The thought process was probably that the more serious we take it, the more it'll get a laugh, but it kind of worked the other way. The more serious it's taken, the more you sympathize with the characters. I think it's one of the reasons characters like the Looney Tunes last for so long. You do identify with them, and you do sympathize with them. Even something as Sylvester trying to beat, you know, eating a bird. You feel what he's going through, and it's also funny. That's one of the reasons I think just Looney Tunes are so great. They can work on so many different levels, whether even the creators were aware of it at the time or not. What did you think of it when you watched as a kid? Did you ever connect it to anything with addiction? Did you even know what addiction was back then? I don't think I did. This might be the cartoon that introduced me to addiction and what it is. Did you find out about it through this? Did you just see it as something sillier? Did you see it as something a little heavier? Or maybe a little bit of both? Let me know what you think. Hey everyone, if there's any particular cartoon you want me to look at as being very dark or twisted, leave it in the comments below. Again, I'm not really looking for movie scenes or cartoons meant for teenagers or older. I'm talking about ones meant for little kids, but still scare the shit out of you. Whether it's an old cartoon or a new cartoon, let me know what you want me to look at.